Yeah, hello guys. Hello guys. Uh, hello guys. Okay, everyone are joining. Okay. Hi guys. I guess you guys missed me. I missed the last live, so I guess. Uh, thank you, bro. Thank you. Okay, I'll just wait for a few minutes. Then I'll just add up our guest. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Hello guys. How are you all? Okay guys, I just before I add the guest to this live, I just give a small intro about him. Today our guest is Dr. Anisam George, is MD pediatrician and assistant professor of Department of Pediatrics in Christine Medical College. Is now currently working in COVID duty. So here he will come and we can discuss about the COVID-19 in children. So I'll just add up him so that we can start our discussion without any delay. So I hope all joined. So I just join our guest. Okay. Okay. George. Yes. Hi sir, how are you?
Hello, good evening, Pavan. I'm well. How are you?
Good sir. I'm too good sir. I'm also good. Yeah.
That's nice.
Okay. Okay sir. Then without delay, I'll just start the today's discussion. Okay.
Yeah, thank you
Uh,
for having me on your
okay.
platform and giving me this opportunity.
So
You
yes.
you
Okay. Thank.
you
Yeah
want to
sir.
wait for some more time for people to join?
Okay, sir. We'll wait for one more minute, then we'll just start our discussion soon.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Oh yes, sir. I guess we can start now. Okay.
Sure.
So yeah, sir. Upon our current we never expected this pandemic to occur. So currently, if you see, there have been 4.67 active cases and 9 lakh cases, 4.67 lakh active cases and 9 lakh people have been discharged and 30,000 deaths are reported in India.
That's right.
Though the spread in the children are very less, if you take the Tamil Nadu active cases population, it is around some 2 lakhs. In that, only 5% people are pediatric age group. So with all this, I would tell like this disease is spreading so rapidly. So could you tell us why this infection spreads so rapidly, and could you tell us the mode of spread and transmission?
Right. So, like you correctly mentioned, this particular disease called COVID-19, which started off as a cluster of cases of fever of unknown etiology in China in late December 2019, has subsequently become a pandemic. WHO declared it as a pandemic in January, and then cases came into India. We went into a lockdown on March 24th, and now we are among the top 5 countries in the world with maximum number of cases and maximum number of deaths. So that is the relevance of your question. How does it transmit, and why is it spreading so fast? So I'll tell you the mode of transmission of COVID-19, both in adults as well as in children, is through the respiratory route. By respiratory route, I mean by droplets, aerosols, or fomites. The other route of transmission is through surfaces. And third, with regard to children, there is a minority of transmission from the mother to the child, the so-called vertical transmission. Now, we'll come to the first thing called a respiratory route. By respiratory route, we mean it can be when the child or the adult coughs, when the person sneezes, or sometimes when the person talks loudly also, respiratory droplets are produced. Now, the difference between droplets and aerosols is just with regard to size. Since there are a group of medical students also listening to this talk, droplets are basically larger particles. Usually they say greater than 10 microns. So because they are larger, their ability to travel is not much. So they usually travel only till about 3 to 6 feet. So that's the reason why in social distancing we say you maintain at least a distance of 6 feet so that the droplets from the infected person do not come and fall on you. Aerosols, on the other hand, are smaller particles. They are less than 10 microns, and because they are lesser in size, they have the ability to remain in the air for a larger period of time. So that's the reason why we are advocating the use of masks, so that this respiratory droplets and aerosols do not enter your body. And the route of entry is when this infected droplets from the infected person gets in through your eyes, through your conjunctiva, through your mucosa, or sometimes through the skin. So the main mode of transmission is the respiratory route. Number 2, this respiratory droplets can either come and fall on you, or it can fall on surfaces also. Like the common things that we use on the table that we use, on the chair that we sit, on the doorknobs, on the taps that we use. So through surfaces also, these droplets can go and sit there. And when you go and touch those droplets, the virus enters your body. So these are the 2 main routes of transmission for COVID-19. That's the reason why we advocate frequent cleaning of surfaces, especially doorknobs, taps, the keyboards in workplaces, the mouse in workplaces, so that we can get rid of this respiratory droplets. With regard to your question, why does it spread so fast? That is because prior to December 2019, this particular virus called SARS-CoV-2 did not exist. So the human body's ability to fight an infection depends on, number 1, have you been exposed to the virus before? Have the people around you been exposed to the virus before? The answer to both these questions with regard to COVID-19 is no. We didn't know that such a virus existed prior to December 2019. So, which means that the entire cohort of population in the entire world is susceptible because nobody has immunity, because nobody has been exposed. So, we are a naive population without any immunity to this virus before. That is one of the main reasons why it is spreading so rapidly. Number 1. Number 2, what is the mode of spread? Like we discussed, the mode of spread is respiratory droplets, which are common things that people do. People speak, people sneeze, people cough. So the mode of transmission is respiratory route, and hence it has a faster chance to spread. If it was a disease that was spreading only through blood transfusion, it wouldn't have spread as much. If it is a disease that was spreading through sexually transmitted disease, it wouldn't have spread much. But the mode of transmission here is respiratory route. The third reason is there is something called as a R0 concept. So what R0 stands for is it describes the infectivity or infectiousness of a particular disease. What it means is the average number of new infections generated by an infectious person. That is, there is a person with COVID-19, what has his ability to transmit the disease. So this particular person, that single person with the disease, can give the infections to up to 3 to 5 people. So the R naught in most of the studies is 3, which is quite a high number. That is the reason, another reason why the disease is spreading fast. So one person can give it to as much as 3 to 5 people. This 3 people who have now been infected will give it to 9 people, and it increases exponentially like that. So that is the third reason why it is spreading so fast. And this is how it has been spreading so far. Now we know all these things. And the reason why it's spreading even now is because we have put some measures in place. Use mask, hand wash, use sanitizers, maintain social distancing. In spite of massive campaigns, there are still people among us who are, still not following this. So that is also another reason why this is spreading.
Okay, so well said, sir. I'll just go to my next question to you.
Sure.
Sir, what would be the clinical presentation in the children who's likely to have COVID positive?
Right. Okay. So, like you mentioned in the start of your talk, fortunately, children are less infected compared to adults. In the sense, their symptoms and severity of disease is less. So the common symptoms that we usually see in children is fever, cough, running nose or so-called coryza, and some of them have headache, body pain, myalgia, lethargy, poor feeding. And they also can have gastrointestinal symptoms such as vomiting and abdominal pain. And some of them have headache as well. Among this, the commonest symptoms that we see is respiratory, fever, cough, coryza. And in severe cases, they present like influenza-like illness or severe acute respiratory illness, where they also have associated breathing difficulty in the form of fast breathing and chest retractions. So these are some of the common symptoms that we see. In adults, the other symptoms that is commonly said is anosmia and agnosia. That is, they lose their ability to smell and they have a decreased taste sensation. This symptoms has been widely, been printed for adult patients, but I personally haven't come across children presenting with these symptoms as yet. That is probably because children will not tell you. That's a problem in general with pediatrics. They don't tell you the symptoms. Even the older children that I've come across have not told these 2 symptoms, but theoretically it is possible. Very rarely in research papers and case reports, some rare symptoms, neurological symptoms like seizures, encephalitis have all been reported, but they are very rare. By far, the commonest symptoms we see is respiratory fever, cough, coryza, lethargy, fast breathing, chest retractions. Having said that, I also need to tell you 2 things. That one, recently a lot of cases, especially from UK and US, have described this new entity called multisystem inflammatory syndrome associated with COVID, where they present with Kawasaki disease-like illness. So that is other presentation that is described. But at the end, I would like to mention, most importantly, that most of these children can be asymptomatic. A good number of pediatric children with COVID-19 can be asymptomatic.
Okay. Sir, now you have mentioned the multiple system inflammatory disorder. Could you describe about it in a briefer manner?
Yeah. So this multi-system inflammatory disorder associated with COVID-19, or it's called as MISC, is what it's usually the mnemonic used is. So in about April, they started noticing, once the COVID started in the UK, especially, they started noticing children presenting with high-grade fever, some amount of conjunctivitis, rashes, and their blood had some elevated inflammatory markers. So basically, they had a Kawasaki disease-like presentation. So Kawasaki disease is an inflammatory disorder. There is a definite, diagnostic criteria for Kawasaki disease. I would not like to go into that. But they noticed that the children are presenting with this Kawasaki disease-like illness. So when they found a cohort of cases, they found some things in common. So the usual symptoms of multisystem inflammatory disorder is fever. They can have conjunctivitis. they can have rashes on the body, and they usually have multi-system involvement. By multiple system organ involvement, which can be predominantly cardiac, it can be renal, or it can be skin manifestations, or it can be lung manifestations. It can be anything. So the reason that they have postulated for this is a heightened immune response, or something called as a cytokine storm. That is, the body is mounting an immune response, which is like a cytokine tsunami, which in turn is leading to this, cohort, leading to this myriad of manifestations. Now, this is extremely rare. If I were to give you numbers, if COVID is present in, let's say, 320 to 350 per 1 lakh children, this multi-system inflammatory disorder is only 2 per 1 lakh. So, it is extremely rare. But it is being increasingly reported. There have been cases reported from India also, in Mumbai, Delhi, in Chennai. Cases have been reported. We also in our institution have had one case thus far. So, so one is the Kawasaki-like manifestations. The second one is this multi-system, usually greater than 2 organ systems involved. And these children have a higher chance of presenting with shock. Shock-like picture, usually secondary to, cardiac dysfunction, especially myocarditis. And what are the blood abnormalities that you see in these children? They will have cytopenias. Counts will start dropping. They will have elevated inflammatory markers such as ESR and CRP. They usually have increasing levels of ferritin. COVID per se can have increasing ferritin, but once they go into this multi-system inflammatory disorder, the ferritin levels drastically increase in the range of 5,000 to 10,000. So elevation of ferritin is also something that is very commonly seen. And sometimes they can present with so-called HLH-like manifestation, hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. They can also have elevated liver enzymes. They can have elevated triglycerides. They can have elevated D-dimer levels. So these are some of the blood manifestations of multi-system inflammatory disorder. And this usually occurs about 2 to 4 weeks after exposure to COVID. It is not in the immediate period. So it is a delayed response. It is usually 2 to 4 weeks after exposure to COVID, and there should be a temporal association with COVID. It is not necessary that all these children need to be RT-PCR positive, but some of them can be RT-PCR positive. Many of them can be antibody positive, but there will be a definite exposure to COVID-19. So there is a temporal association, and it is usually 2 to 4 weeks after exposure to COVID. And the underlying pathology, like I said, remember one word, that is a heightened immune response or a cytokine storm. And how do you treat it? It's like how you treat Kawasaki. You need to the modalities that are used is one, IV immunoglobulin, steroids. IV steroids can be used, and the so-called biological agents, IL-6 antagonist, tocilizumab. So these are some of the drugs that are used for treating MISC. So the easiest way to remember is there is a temporal association with COVID. They present with Kawasaki-like symptoms. They usually have more than 2 organ systems involved. They will have elevated inflammatory markers with associated cytopenias. They'll have elevated ferritin and D-dimer levels. A lot of them can present with shock, and usually 2 to 4 weeks after COVID, RT-PCR can be positive or negative, and you treat them with steroids, IV immunoglobulins, tocilizumab. So that is in brief about multi-system inflammatory disorder.
So, sir. We even see asymptomatic children. Is that they involved in spreading the disease to others?
Yes, like I said, a significant amount of pediatric COVIDs can be asymptomatic. A lot of children whom I have seen whose parents are positive actually came in being completely asymptomatic. So a good number of them can be asymptomatic. But the points to remember is that even though they are asymptomatic, the need for quarantine is paramount. They need to be quarantined. When you examine them, you need to follow all our infection control precautions. Children should be taught about the need for hand washing, they should be given face masks, and all the hygiene
Okay.
precautions have to be taken.
Okay. Okay, sir. Okay. Sir, is there vulnerable groups in children who are more easily susceptible to this COVID infection?
Okay. So before I answer that question, just in continuation to the last question,
Okay. Okay.
there is an important question that arises: can asymptomatic children transmit disease? So that is something for us
Yeah.
to remember. The answer to that
Okay.
is yes. Asymptomatic children can also transmit disease. So
Okay.
if they are asymptomatic and still positive, they need to be quarantined.
Okay.
Especially keep the elderly in the family away
Okay.
from children, because they are the
Okay.
ones who are more likely to get sick. So the other
Okay.
point to remember is asymptomatics can still transmit disease, but
Okay.
recently there have been some conflicting reports regarding this. Now coming to the
Okay.
question that you asked, are there any vulnerable groups in pediatrics?
Groups.
So I think what
Pediatrics.
you're trying to ask is there a cohort of children who are more likely to get infected, or is there a cohort of children who are more likely to have more severe disease compared to normal children? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, sir. I'm asking like
Yes, okay.
compared to the okay.
Compared to normal children, right?
Normal
So
children. Yeah.
by now, all of us are very aware of the fact that among adults,
Yeah.
adults with comorbidities have a higher chance of getting severe disease, like adults
Getting
with
yeah.
diabetes, hypertension, or
Tension.
cardiac disease are have a more chance of getting severe disease. So
Yeah.
just like that entity exists, it exists in children also. So
Okay.
children with comorbidities are a vulnerable group who are likely to get infected and who are likely to have more severe disease. So who are these vulnerable groups? Children with underlying chronic lung disease, children with
Okay.
cystic fibrosis, children with bronchiectasis, children with uncontrolled asthma, children with
Yeah.
underlying lung disorders, they are a vulnerable group. Children with underlying cardiac disorders,
Okay.
untreated, undiagnosed heart diseases, cyanotic or acyanotic or any other kind of a heart disease like cardiomyopathy, they are more
Okay.
susceptible. Children with underlying renal disorders, children with nephrotic
Okay.
syndrome, children with acute renal failure, children with chronic
Okay.
renal failure, children who are on immunomodulatory medication, especially children on steroids for any reason. Steroids suppress the immune system, so they are
Okay.
a vulnerable group. And
Okay.
even though diabetes and hypertension are very rare in children, it's still possible. So children with diabetes and hypertension are vulnerable, and children with underlying immunodeficiencies, with
Okay.
any kind of diagnosed immunodeficiencies, are a vulnerable group. And most
Okay.
importantly, children with malignancies, all are
Okay.
leukemias, all are solid cell tumors. Any child who's got underlying malignancy, especially blood malignancy, and any child who is on chemotherapeutic medications, cancer medications,
Okay.
are more susceptible to get COVID-19. I have seen a lot of our oncology children presenting with shock
Oh, okay.
because they have underlying malignancy. So children with malignancy, hands down, are a vulnerable group and are susceptible to more severe disease. Among
Okay.
normal children, children less than 1 year of age, infants, have an
Okay.
increased chance of getting sick compared to older children. So broadly,
Okay.
these are the vulnerable groups.
Okay. So as you said, the children are being asymptomatic with COVID-19 compared to the adults. Is there any immunological difference between the adult and the children's?
Yeah, so I would like to give you some statistics. If you look at the entire cohort of COVIDs that we have, children are usually, in most studies and most research papers, children constitute less than 5%. Among this
Okay.
5%, only about 1 to 2% requires intensive care. And among this
Okay.
1 to 2%, only about 0.5 to 0.6% is the mortality. Okay,
Mortality.
so that is the statistics if you were to look at it, and those are actually pretty good numbers as far as we are concerned, and it is heartening to know that children have less disease. Now, are there any immunological differences which is leading to this discrepancy between adults and
Yeah.
children? The answer to that is also yes. Nobody really knows as to why this is so exactly. Nobody knows, but multiple papers have put forward multiple hypotheses. So I will tell you whatever is what I know and whatever is what I have read up. So one, for any organism to enter into your body, the organism needs to have a portal of entry, or what you call as a receptor. Okay. Now, for COVID-19, we said that the portal of entry into the body is through the respiratory tract, through the mucosa or through the respiratory tract. Now, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, there is a receptor called ACE2 receptor. It stands for, you would have read in physiology, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptor.
Receptor, yeah.
So that is the receptor to which this COVID-19 virus binds. And then it is taken up into the body, and then the virus multiplies inside the body and leads to disease manifestations. Now, this expression of COVID-19 receptors, apparently studies have proven that as the age increases, the density of this ACE2 receptors increases, which means adults and older children have a much higher density of ACE2 receptors compared to smaller children. Or vice versa, children have less ACE2 receptors compared to adults. So this is one of the immunological differences, number one.
Okay.
Number two, whenever organism enters the body mounts the immune response. Now, this mounting of immune response can either lead to the infection getting controlled, or sometimes what happened is the body produces a heightened immune response. There is a pro-inflammatory response, which can be deleterious to the body, which means that the ones who have an increased response, that is, you call as an aberrant innate or adaptive immunity, that is also harmful. So we have noticed that this aberrant innate and adaptive response is more in adults compared to children. So that heightened response is leading to more disease manifestations in them. This is another postulate. And the third one is mucociliary clearance. The primary pathology is in the lung in most children and most adults. So the protective mechanism against that is something called as a ciliary clearance. So adults, as the age increases, your ability for mucociliary clearance decreases. The other things in adults is things like smoking also decreases the mucociliary clearance, whereas children have a very strong mucociliary clearance. So that is another postulate that has been put forward in studies. The fourth one is, as age increases, the immune cells or the lymphocytes value decreases, whereas in children it's not so. Because the pediatric age group have an increased exposure to viruses. Viral diseases are more in the children. So because of that, their immune response is tuned to fighting this viral diseases, which produces cross-infectivity and is found to be helpful with regard to COVID also. And the fifth reason is comorbidities that we discussed. Diabetes, hypertension, heart disease are all more common in adults compared to children. So that is another reason why children are less infected or children have less disease compared to adults. And the last one is exposure. Adults are going out to work, they are going out to buy vegetables, they are interacting. But since COVID started, lockdown, adults ku pandrome illiyo kolangal ellariyum veetla vechirukom. There is no schools, they are not going out, so their exposure is less. So this immunological differences in the form of less AC receptors, a heightened immune response in adults, increased mucociliary clearance in children, and the cross protection from other viral diseases, lack of comorbidities, and decreased exposure compared to adults. These are some of the reasons why we think children have less disease compared to adults.
Okay, well said, sir. Sir, actually, இப்போ கரண்டா பார்த்தோம்னா parents வந்து ரொம்ப பயப்படுறாங்க, like taking their kids to the hospital for even for the routine immunization கூட. So, what's your comment on it? Is that they need to continue the immunization schedule?
Absolutely yes. The answer to that is an undoubted yes, and period. There is no doubts about it. See, the efficacy of vaccines is proven beyond doubt. Okay. The vaccines that we give in childhood, like BCG, diphtheria, pertussis, measles, mumps, they are all efficacious vaccines, and they are against diseases that are potentially preventable by vaccination. Okay. So we have a lot of COVID going around now. There is no doubt about it. But all these old diseases are still there in the population. We still have tuberculosis.
Okay.
We still have
Okay.
diphtheria. We still have
Okay.
pertussis. We still have measles and mumps. These diseases have not gone into hiding. They are still there. So if
Okay.
you do not give these vaccines, your children are susceptible to get this infection, especially less than 1 year of life. And infections like diphtheria can potentially kill. You get diphtheria, most children will die. That's the reason why
Okay.
we tell give vaccine, we give vaccine. Measles again is a highly infective disease. R naught we said for COVID is 3. The R naught for measles is 12, which means it's highly infective. And they have protection from the mothers only till the first 6 months of life. That's why we give the measles vaccine at 9 months. So the answer to your question, should routine vaccines be continued? Answer is a yes. Most
Okay.
of the hospitals have put infection control measures in place. Go to the hospital, wear a mask, give a mask to your child, use gloves, use hand sanitators, maintain
Okay.
social distancing in the hospital, but please go to the hospital, give immunization and come back. Routine immunizations should continue, including influenza
Okay.
vaccination.
ஓகே சார், நம்ம இப்போ பிசிஜி வேக்சின் பத்தி கூட பார்த்தோம் சார். அண்ட் ஆல்சோ சம் ஸ்டடிஸ் டெல்ஸ் லைக் பிசிஜி வேக்சினேஷன் பீங் ப்ரொடெக்டிவ் அகெயின்ஸ்ட் கோவிட் இன்ஃபெக்ஷன். இஸ் தட் ட்ரூ?
Right. So when COVID came to India in early March, when our numbers were less, so there was a lot of hype going around in the news saying that Indians in general are less susceptible to COVID-19 because of the temperature that is prevailing in India, because we have more immune response compared to people in other part of the world. And one other thing that had a lot of hype was this with regard to BCG vaccination.
BCG vaccine, yeah.
Now, basically, as medical students and practitioners of medicine, we should have a basic concept about vaccine. So, by vaccination, what are we trying to do? So, what we are trying to do is we are introducing the body to a small amount of that particular organism or the organism particle, so that we enable the body to identify that such an organism exists. After enabling the body to identify that the organism exists, the body will mount an immune response. The body will recognize the organism, memory cells will be produced, and this memory cells will remain forever. So the next time the body is exposed to a real bug, to the real disease, this memory cells will come into play. There will be a heightened immune response, and the body will curb the infection. So this concept is called inducing immunogenicity. This is what we are trying to do by giving vaccinations. Okay. So what we are doing is we are altering the body's immune response, or we are telling the body to mount an immune response. So this particular concept has recently got a term called trained immunity. That is, the immune system is being trained by vaccines to mount an immune response and to battle the disease the next time you come across the organism.
Okay.
Recent studies have found that, see, initially we were of the opinion that if you give BCG vaccination, it's against tuberculosis. If you give measles vaccine, it's against measles. But recent studies have found that it is not only against that particular disease that the vaccine is efficacious. They are also providing some kind of, protection against other diseases as well.
Okay.
So multiple studies have come out where they found that children who are vaccinated have a lesser mortality compared to children who are not vaccinated.
Okay.
Not necessarily because of the particular disease. All-cause mortality. Because of multiple reasons are less in children who are vaccinated compared to children who are non-vaccinated. So basically, there seems to be some kind of a heightened immune response in general in children who are vaccinated compared to children who are not vaccinated. And this has come recently in a NEJM article also, a standard journal. So the answer to that question can be yes. But there are two ways of looking at it. So the one way of asking the question is, just because you have been given BCG vaccination, will my child not get COVID? The answer to that is no. Even though he is vaccinated, with all the vaccinations, there is still a real possibility that the child can have COVID.
Cool.
The other way of asking the question is, does these vaccinations provide some kind of immunity against COVID? The answer to that is a yes. How much it is
Okay.
needs to be proven.
Okay. Okay, sir. Okay. So my next question is, we have been coming across the term herd immunity.
Yeah.
What is the role of herd immunity with regard to COVID infection?
Okay. So this concept of herd immunity is not new. Herd immunity has been there for years. And
Yeah.
herd immunity is a very important principle that medical students need to understand. So by definition, what herd immunity means is that it is the resistance to the spread of a contagious disease within a population. So that
Okay.
results if a sufficiently high proportion of individuals are immune to the disease. Okay. So if I have COVID-19,
Okay.
I have a potential to transmit the disease to somebody else.
Okay.
But if the 10 people around me do not have any immunity to COVID, all 10 of them are susceptible to get infection. But
Okay.
among the 10 around me, about 8 of them or at least 7 of them have some kind of an immunity to COVID already. Then
Okay.
there is a chance that the other 3 will also be, the other 3 who do not have some immunity will also be protected because the others around them have immunity. You understand what I'm
Okay.
telling you? So
sir.
it is the ability of a population to protect those among them who are non-immune because the bulk of the population have immunity.
Okay.
That is the concept of herd immunity. Now,
Okay.
how will the population get herd immunity? A population can get herd immunity through 2 modalities. One, a person can get an immunity if he's already been infected to the disease.
Okay.
Okay. So if we had measles once before, it's very unlikely that you will get measles again. If you have had chicken pox once in your life, we always say, already so there is a less chance that I'll get it again. So one way of getting herd immunity is if you have had an infection once before. The second reason how you can get herd immunity is through vaccinations. So these are the 2 ways in which a population can get immunity. One, by getting infected. Number 2, by receiving vaccination. So these are the 2 ways. Okay. Now, what is the importance of herd immunity with regard to diseases? Now, there is a concept called herd immunity threshold, which means that beyond a particular percentage. So let's say that herd immunity threshold can be different for different populations. For example, the herd immunity threshold, I think I can see someone has asked what is the cutoff percentage for herd immunity. So that's what I'm coming to. So for measles, the herd immunity threshold is as high as 90 to 95%. Okay. So if about 90 to 95% of people in the population are immune, then it is very less likely that measles will become an endemic or spread very fast. Similar to that, for COVID-19, I am not an epidemiologist. I am a pediatrician at best. Okay. But based on the papers and based on the talks that I've listened from leading epidemiologists, including epidemiologists from my institution like Dr. J.P. Mulil, the estimated herd immunity threshold cutoff for COVID-19 is about 55 to 75%. That is, if 55 to 75% of the population has been infected, then the massive increase in number of cases will start coming down. Till that, there is a good possibility that this infection is going to spread. Or how will we achieve this threshold? 1, by people getting infected, or 2, God willing, a vaccine should come fast. And once efficacious vaccine comes, then the herd immunity threshold will start increasing. Once the herd immunity threshold starts increasing, the R0 also comes down. I told you R0 is the ability of a contagious person to spread disease to others, which for COVID-19 at present is 3. Once the herd immunity threshold goes up, the R0 will start coming down. And once
Okay.
R naught becomes 1 or less than 1, the incidence of disease in the population will start coming down drastically.
Okay. Okay, well said, sir. Sir, நம்ம இப்ப பார்த்தோம்னா even the pregnant mothers gets infected. Is that possible they can transmit to the newborn? I'm asking about the, is there any chance of vertical transmission?
Vertical
And
transmission,
also
yeah.
how
So,
severe this COVID is in neonates also.
okay. So vertical transmission is basically transmission from a pregnant mother to her fetus or newborn child.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
what vertical transmission is. If
Yeah.
there are some parents watching this particular video. So,
Okay.
so there have been case reports of pregnant mother transmitting the disease to their newborn children. The chance for transmission is maximum when the mother gets COVID 2 weeks prior to delivery. What is the
Okay.
effect of COVID possibility in the first 2 trimesters? That data has to come in. Only studies,
Okay.
because the pandemic is only about 4 to 6 months old. So only further papers will know the effect of COVID-19 on pregnancy that we don't know yet. But there is a real possibility of a pregnant mother transmitting disease to the newborn child. There have been case reports of children as old as 1 to 3 days old being COVID positive. RT-PCR has been positive in, as per case reports, in children who are 16 hours old, 36 hours old, and all that. So the answer to the question, vertical transmission is possible. As per the data we have now, the answer is yes. What are the symptoms that are possible in a neonate? Neonate is a newborn baby. So what are the symptoms? It is pretty much like the older children: fever, cough, breathing difficulty. These are the common symptoms that are there. And they also can have a sepsis-like presentation. Poor feeding, lethargy is also described. But in neonates also, the disease is not very severe. Thankfully, by God's grace, even in neonates, most neonates who have turned to be COVID positive also have only very mild symptoms, 1 to 2 days of fever, and most of them recover. Having said that, there are case reports of severe manifestations also. There have been neonates who have required CPAP. There have been neonates who have required intubation and ventilatory care, and there have even been deaths. But in general, symptoms in neonates have been mild. Vertical transmission is possible.
Okay, sir. A small question is from a follower. Is the testing similar to adults even in babies 1 to 2 days old?
Even in newborn babies, RT-PCR is being used. But RT-PCR, does it definitely have to be positive? The answer to that is no. RT-PCR in general has a sensitivity of only 70%, which means 30% can be false negative. False negative meaning the person might be really having the disease, but RT-PCR is negative. The test is showing a negative result. Okay. So RT-PCR can be positive in neonates. RT-PCR is done. If the mother is positive, RT-PCR is done in a newborn baby. If the mother is getting symptomatic after delivery, as soon as the mother gets positive, the babies are also being tested. So yes, RT-PCR can be done, but if the mother is positive, you treat the baby in a way that the baby is also potentially infective. That's how you start looking at them. So you use your personal protective measures and all that.
Okay, sir. Let's consider a newborn mother is COVID positive. Whether she will be able to breastfeed her newborn, whether she is allowed to do.
Okay, so the answer to that is yes. As per the data we have now, COVID-19 is not transmitted through breast milk. So there are multiple agencies coming out with multiple forums coming out with multiple recommendations. In India, we follow the Indian Academy of Pediatrics or the National Neonatology Forum recommendations. As per the Indian recommendations, even though the mother is positive, we do not separate the mother and the baby. The mothers are allowed to breastfeed because the virus, there is no evidence for transmission of COVID through the breast milk. But the mother can still transmit via cough, via touching the baby and all that. So the mother should be following strict aseptic personal protective equipments and hand washing. So strict hand washing, use of hand sanitizers, wearing a face mask
Mask.
for the mother, all that is mandatory. But yes, she can breastfeed, and the mother and the baby, we usually do not separate in India as long as the mother is not severely sick.
Okay.
The baby is
Okay.
still kept
Okay.
with the mother, and the mother can breastfeed.
Okay. Sir, can you tell us the investigatory modalities for diagnosing the COVID-19 in children? Any blood abnormalities or any other abnormalities are noticed in the children?
Right. So the investigative modalities are not drastically different as compared to adults. It's pretty much
Okay.
the same. So
Okay.
there are two aspects to your question. One is confirmatory diagnosis, and the second one is
Yeah.
what are the blood abnormalities that you see.
Okay.
So the
Yeah.
confirmatory test is RT-PCR. So reverse
Okay.
most hospitals. So can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah,
Can
sir.
you hear me?
A small
Yeah.
delay.
So
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So RT-PCR, the samples are usually taken either from the nose or from the throat, or it can be a deep nasopharyngeal or other secretions, lower respiratory secretions like bronchoalveolar lavage or endotracheal secretions can also be taken and sent.
Okay.
Now, you send the swab, you get the result in about 4 to 6 hours. You get it on the same day.
Okay.
So, like I mentioned before, RT-PCR has a sensitivity of only about 70%, which means 30% can be false negative. But still, RT-PCR is a gold standard. The other tests that
Okay.
are available is antigen tests. There are also tests like CBNAT, TrueNAT. I'm not going into the details of that. And the last one is
Okay.
antibody testing.
Okay.
So antibody
Okay.
testing, antibodies are of two types, IgM and IgG. IgM antibodies are usually produced about 5 to 7 days into the infection, and IgG antibodies usually in the second week of illness, usually within 10 to 14 days. So antibody
Okay.
tests can also be used for diagnosis, but it can be used
Okay.
for population studies, like to know how many percentage of population have actually achieved immunity. So it is
Okay.
more useful for those kind of things. As of now, RT-PCR is a gold standard for confirmation. Regarding the
Okay.
second part of your question, in children, let me also add that in children, we usually send nasopharyngeal swab, a deep nasopharyngeal swab, because it's easy to get.
Okay.
The usual blood abnormalities that we usually see is one, they have a decreased lymphocyte count, lymphopenia. They have
Lymphopenia. Okay.
they have an elevated CRP in the range of about 40 to 100 or even more in severe cases. They have an elevated ferritin. They have an elevated D-dimer levels. They have an elevated LDH levels. They have an elevated CPK levels. So the most common ones that you usually use for diagnosis is lymphopenia and elevated CRP and elevated ferritin.
Okay.
The other indicators are obviously some children can have chest X-ray abnormalities. All children need not have. So in the chest X-ray, we see a predominance of lower lobe lesions, and peripheral lesions are more common than central lesions. And CT scan is reported, but CT scan is not something that we do in all children. It's not mandatory to do a CT scan. And if you were to do multiple patterns described, the most common one being ground glassing.
Okay.
Ground glass
Okay.
opacities.
Appearing. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Sir, for how long can a COVID positive patient be infective? Is a negative swab report enough past period to discharge from hospital?
Okay, that's a good question. So
Okay.
there is a question that is coming: are asymptomatic less contagious? Are pre-symptomatic people less contagious? Somebody has asked that question. I can see that question coming up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
so pre-symptomatics can transmit. So what pre-symptomatics mean is the person has not yet started developing any symptoms. The person doesn't have any cough, coryza,
Okay.
fever or anything of that sort, but is infected. Yes, pre-symptomatics, prior to the development of symptoms, 2 to 3 days prior itself, they are potentially infective as per reports. Okay, and they can transmit as much as people without with symptoms. Number one. With regard to asymptomatic, I already mentioned asymptomatic can also transmit disease, but are they less contagious? We are not very sure. Now, with regard to your question, how long are they infective? The usual
Okay.
incubation period is about 2 to 14 days. The mean incubation is about 5 to 7 days. But the
Okay.
maximum infectivity, they say, is in the first week of illness. So
Okay.
beyond 7 to 10 days of illness, their infectivity
Okay.
comes down drastically. So what am I basing this comment on? Studies have proven that once a person has become infected, in the first till about 7 to 8 days, they were able to grow this on cultures. Viral cultures were positive. But after about 8th to 10th day of illness, they were not able to isolate the organism. So in general, the hypothesis now is that once they cross the 7 to 10 days after onset of symptoms, their infectivity
Okay.
comes down.
Okay.
Okay. Having said that, the need for quarantine is a must. So even after discharge from the hospital, by about 7 to 10 days, these people or children need to be quarantined for 2 weeks. That is a must, because there have been isolated reports of people getting infected even after 3 weeks and all that. So because the viral load and the viral cultures are usually negative at the end of 7 to 8 days, now a COVID swab negative prior to discharge is not mandatory.
Okay.
But all the protocols are keeping on changing. But as per the present protocol, if you are asymptomatic, you can be admitted in a hospital or in a COVID care center, usually in a COVID care center. By about 7 to 10 days, if you're well, you can be discharged without a COVID swab. People who are symptomatic and were admitted, if you have been febrile for a period of 3 days, you can be discharged without a COVID swab. Only in people who are severely infected, the ones who required ICU care, ventilatory care, for them we prefer having a negative swab prior to discharge. So with very specific to your question, if COVID swab negative mandatory prior to discharge, the answer is no. But quarantine after discharge is mandatory, because there is still a minute potential for you to transmit.
Okay. Sir, after diagnosing, we'll go into the treatment. So what are the treatment modalities available in children who are COVID positive?
Yeah, like I told you, there have been a significant amount of children are all asymptomatic. Okay.
Yeah.
So most of them require only symptomatic management. That is, hydration is very important. If they have fever, you give them paracetamol, but avoid giving them NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Try and avoid. Now, once they fit into the criteria of influenza-like illness, by influenza-like illness, I mean an acute onset of fever in the last 10 days with some amount of, cough, coryza and all that fits into the criteria for ILI. So when they fit into a criteria for ILI, one thing that you can start is oseltamivir, considering that it might be H1N1. But once your swab is negative, you stop oseltamivir. And the other thing is, if, prior to you getting your swab report of a COVID positivity, you are justified in treating the child with any antibiotic, considering a community-acquired pneumonia, because you don't know whether it is COVID or not. So you can give azithro or any of the locally used antibiotics for community-acquired pneumonia. Now, the ones who have got severe disease, the ones who have hypoxia, cyanosis, lethargy, poor feeding and all, definitely require hospital admission. And based on the level of distress, you need to give them respiratory support, which can be in the form of a nasal prongs, or in the form of a face mask, or in the form of a high flow nasal oxygen, NIV, or intubation. There are specific criteria for each of this, which I don't want to go into, and which is beyond the scope of this particular discussion. Now, the other drugs that are available is steroids have been used in critically ill children, especially in the ICU settings. And steroids have recently been, there have been papers saying that they decrease mortality. The other drug that is there as part of protocols is hydroxychloroquine, which has a help in decreasing the organism binding to the AC receptors that we talked about. Some antivirals like remdesivir has been widely propagated. And the other medication is one of the main interleukin with regard to COVID-19 is IL-6. So tocilizumab, which is an IL-6 antagonist, is also there as part of the protocols. So these are broadly the medications, but in most cases, we don't have to use any of this as far as children are concerned. They get away with it.
Okay. சார் இப்போ நம்ம ஜென்ரலா பார்த்தோம்னா இட்ஸ் வெரி டிஃபிகல்ட் டு எஜுகேட் த கரண்ட் சுச்சுவேஷன் டு த சில்ட்ரன்ஸ் பிகாஸ் தே வில் பி பிளேயிங் அரௌண்ட் அண்ட் ஈவன் தே வில் keep their fingers in their mouth. So how can we educate them by the use of hand sanitizer and social distancing and also the mask requirements to them?
Okay. Okay. So educating children. Okay. So
Yeah.
see, with regard to children, not only as far as COVID is concerned, it's best to tell the truth to children. There is a general, propensity
Okay.
among parents to induce fear
Okay.
among children. Doctor கிட்ட போனா
Okay.
ஊசி குத்திடுவாரு. And we all, if you don't eat, ghost will come and catch you. பூச்சி வந்து பிடிச்சிரும். These are common tactics that we use, which I think is not the right way to do things. It's best
Okay.
to tell the truth to children. Okay. So there is no need to induce fear in children, but tell that there is a illness going around which spreads fast to people, which has the potential to make you sick, which has the potential to make your parents and your grandparents more sick compared to you. That is one. Number two, what we can tell children is, children always like to help. They like to help their parents. They like to help with household things. So the one way to tell them is, you have a real capability of helping the society and helping your parents and grandparents from becoming sick. So you put that concept into their minds. So they will obviously ask the question, what are we supposed to do? Then you teach them hand washing, use of hand sanitizer, especially small children, one who are less than 5 years old. If you tell them to hand wash, they might not hand wash. But if you show them, they basically do what they see. So monkey see, monkey do. That is this thing. So they do what they see. So if you
Okay.
are following hand washing precautions, use of hand sanitizers, use of masks, it is very likely that your children will do the same. You cannot expect them to do something that you are not doing yourself. Okay, so first the parents need to show them that they are doing all this, and most kids will replicate. And the second one, like I said, is do not induce a fear in them, but tell them that their actions will help other people, and most of the children will do. Number three,
Okay.
because there is widespread curb on their activities, they are not going to school, they are not going to social places, they are not going to theaters, they are not going to parks. So children are potentially frustrated. So the other thing to do is keep them engaged. How can you keep them engaged? Parents, relatives need to spend time with children. You do things as a family. Take up a hobby. Get them interested in household activities. Get them interested in hobbies like gardening. Things that you can do without actually having to go out. Play board
Okay.
games as a family. Inculcate a hobby in them, like drawings or artwork
Music,
or
yeah,
music. In potentially developmental activities like that, you engage them. So these are some of the ways in which you can get children involved. And hand washing practices and all that, they will start doing it once they know that you are doing it. And it will help them not only with regard to COVID, it is a general hygiene principle.
Okay. Sir, parents are more concerned on immunity boosting foods and also medicine. What's your comment on it? How we can boost the immunity of its children? Sorry.
Yeah, that is a $1 million question. There is a lot of hype going about the immunity
Foods,
boosting
yeah.
food. There is no magic pill to boost immunity. Okay. One thing as pediatricians that we tell all parents is, with regard to diet, give them a balanced diet. There is no single food item that is going to protect your child against COVID-19.
COVID, yeah.
There is no magic diet. But in general, what we tell parents with regard to diet is a good protein diet. Egg is a extremely good source of protein. Dairy products are a good sources of protein. Now, if you were to ask for specific things that can boost immunity, papers have come out saying that vitamin C have good immunity boosting properties. Vitamin E has good properties as an antioxidant. Vitamin D
Okay.
also has immunity boosting properties. Among the
Sir,
minerals,
sorry to interrupt. I guess our live will be ended within some 10 seconds. I guess it's like due to some Instagram settings, I guess. So I
so should we
guess we'll
come back?
continue again. Yeah, sir,
We,
we'll come back again. Yeah,
we'll cut and come back.
yeah, we'll come back and continue.
Extremely sorry, guys. I guess it's Instagram setting, so I guess we can do up to 1 hour the live. So I guess we exceeded more than that. So we'll continue the topic. Wait, I'll just add our guest in. I'll just add our guest. Mm. Yeah, I'm just adding sir. Anish, Doctor. Uh, uh,
Sorry, sir. It's actually the Instagram settings. Okay.
No
So
problem.
we'll continue with the question, sir. Yeah.
We will just wait for for a
Yeah, sir.
couple of
Maybe we'll wait for
seconds.
a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I guess people are joining. Yeah. I guess we could not exit more than 1 hour. Actually, we have done the live for more than 1 hour.
Okay. Yeah. Shall we continue?
Okay, sir. Okay, we can continue. Yeah.
Yeah. So one is increased protein content in the form of dairy products and egg. Now, green leafy vegetables, all green leafy vegetables, especially broccoli and mushrooms. And the next one is nuts. Any nuts, ground nuts, peanuts, pistachios, hazelnuts, walnuts. All nuts are rich in all the vitamins and especially trace minerals like magnesium and zinc, which have strong immunity boosting properties. Fruits, especially the ones rich in vitamin C, like guava, kiwi, orange, lime, all these fruits. So most fruits, green leafy vegetables, a protein rich diet, and some of the herbs that are found to be very good is garlic and curcumin. Curcumin is basically a element that is found in turmeric, so which has strong immunity boosting properties. And honey has been recommended by even American Academy of Pediatrics, even for respiratory tract infections. So one is a good balanced diet containing good quantities of especially nuts, fruits, and green leafy vegetables. Number two, something that can boost our immunity is obviously exercise. So for older children, it can be playing, outdoor games that involves intense physical exercise, like playing football or basketball. Basically games that make you run and do things. So exercise is a very important aspect that can boost immunity. The last one is relaxation. Relaxation in the form of medication, yoga, taking up a good hobby, and the fourth one is sleep, adequate sleep. All children minimum 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And the last one is, if any of these children have any underlying comorbidities like the ones we already discussed, that needs to be tackled, because if the underlying comorbidity is not treated well, their overall immunity is going to come down. So yeah,
Okay.
diet, relaxation, good
Okay.
sleep, exercise, and treatment of underlying comorbidities.
Okay. Sir, my next question will be a bit difficult for you. Sir, as you know, the cases are rising in India, and now we are among the top 5 countries in the world. So, when we will peak, the peak cases will peak in India.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're asking when are we likely to, achieve the peak in the
Go to the
number of
peak.
cases? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like I confessed some time back, I'm not an epidemiologist. I am a pediatrician. I do not have an answer to that question. But
Okay.
from whatever I have inferred thus far, from listening to other experts speaking on the subject, India is a big country. We are one of the biggest countries in the world, and we have a heterogeneous population. We have various states
Okay.
and various states with varying density of population. Okay, so
Okay.
there is no. I do not think that there is going to be a single peak. We are going to have multiple peaks. By multiple peaks, I mean Tamil Nadu might achieve a peak at one point in time. Delhi might achieve its own peak in another point of time, and
Okay.
Mumbai might achieve it in some other point of time. Bihar, Orissa, Jharkhand likewise might achieve it some other point of time. There is no, I do not think there is going to be a single peak. It is going to be regional multiple peaks. Number one.
Okay.
Number two, when we are going to reach peak in each of these individual places depends on, like we already discussed, on herd immunity.
Okay.
When we are achieving that herd immunity threshold. Number two, when we are going to get a vaccine. So the faster we are going to get an efficacious vaccine, the higher are our chances of controlling the infection.
Okay.
And most importantly, what are we doing as of today? Are we following infection control measures? Are we washing our hands? Are we using sanitizers? Are we wearing masks? Are we maintaining social distancing? Are we avoiding going to places that are crowded? So as long as people are going to neglect these practices, the cases are going to increase.
Okay. Okay. Well said, sir. Sir, we are almost at the end of the life. Sir, you have any advice to the parents regarding this COVID issue to their children, because they are very panic to deal this issue.
Right.
Yeah.
So as we have discussed thus far, by God's grace, children, most of them are asymptomatic. The disease in them is generally less severe, and mortality in them is very, very low, which are all good things. So my first advice to parents is there is no need to panic. Having said that, there is no need to panic, but there is a real need to be responsible and act responsibly with regard to infection control measures. There is a real need for us as adults and parents to follow all the infection control measures that are being promulgated by the government and all the other agencies, maintain social distancing. There is a real need for us to teach our children about infection control practices, wearing masks and maintaining social distancing. And there is a real need to avoid using public places. And this is a time when the kids do not have much things to do. The schools are shut down. There is a real need for us as parents to be with the children and spend time with them and inculcate good habits and good activities in them and keep them engaged. And most importantly, like my friend Ardhanari said in the last interview that you had with him, do not, read up on all the muck that comes in WhatsApp or news and all that. You get your information from reliable sources, which are, some of them being the Center for Disease Control, WHO, and things that are being produced by the Government of India, by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So read your information from reliable sources. And, COVID-19 is not the first pandemic. We have had pandemics in the past. Humanity has gone through multiple pandemics and humanity has overcome those pandemics. So like all bad things, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. We will win it. When we win it, when will it pass depends on our response to the pandemic, when we achieve herd immunity, and when the vaccine comes in. So it depends on a lot of those things.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. As you said, we even succeeded in few pandemics which occurred before, and I hope even this pandemic will successfully end up soon. And I guess we'll wait for a few minutes so that if any doubts from the followers, so that you can clarify it. So yeah, a few minutes. Can you stay on the line, sir? Yeah.
Sure.
Guys, if you have any doubts regarding this discussion, you can post it down so that sir will be able to clarify it. So post it on the chat box so we can able to take it. Yeah. If any doubts, you can post it down. So we'll wait for a while.
So there is a question: how to engage
To
children
engage
during the
children during lockdown. Yeah.
lockdown. So I think I briefly touched upon it. So one way, most important thing is this is a God-given time for us to spend time with our children. At no point in time would parents have got such an opportunity to spend time. They do not have office. Children do not have school. So one is to spend time with them. Second is to do things as a as a family. Take up family-oriented activities. On one day, you can clean up the house. On another day, you can clean up a garage if you have. Take up activities such
Okay.
as gardening. So slightly older children, mothers and fathers can choose to teach them how to cook. Or inculcate other hobbies in them, like those parents who are good at drawing and artwork. Try and teach them to your children. Try and take them away from social media and electronic devices, and engage in such activities. Avoid going to places where there is a tendency to crowd, but still you can go out of your if you stay in a flat, you still can go out into the for a walk in the evening wearing mask. Nobody's telling you no to do that. So
Okay.
you can still go out and if your children are slightly older, go for jogging with them. You wear your mask, you maintain your distance, you can still run, both parents and children together, or you can walk on your terrace. So if we want to do, there are a lot of things for us to do.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll wait for other questions to come, sir, and then we'll wind up the live. Yeah.
So somebody has asked, is drinking kashayam helpful? So that again, I personally do not have an answer to that question. Our government, especially Tamil Nadu government, has come out with Kabasura Kudineer and all that, which they are giving to most people. So anything that doesn't kill you will only make you stronger. So if you believe in it, as long as these things do not harm you, if you believe in it, you can take. But I personally do not have any evidence with me as of now to support drinking kashayam. I don't have any evidence with me to go against it as well. So it's a neutral answer.
Okay. So, okay, sir. Okay, sir. Then we just close our live. Sir,
Sure.
it's very, thank you so much, sir, for helping me, and personally, you did more help to me also, and also you helped my team also. It's such a pleasure to have a live with you like this in this platform, and I hope this have helped many people to know about the COVID in children age groups, and you clarified many doubts which
Thank
many
you.
got. So I feel we'll end up the live. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
having me on your platform, Pavan. Hope it was helpful. And I would like to end by saying, yeah, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
We'll overcome it.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
sir.
Thank you so much for having
Thank you
me.
so much, sir. Okay.
See you.
Guys, we ended the live with Dr. Anis. I want to tell you that next live is going to be with Dr. Subhashni. She is a senior assistant in Sri Mugamika Institute of Medical Science. She is in Department of Community Medicine. Next week, actually, the World Breast Week. feeding week, so she will come and address about the importance of breastfeeding and its awareness. To make an awareness, our team been scheduled this live. So I hope you guys support as you are supporting now us, and you can even see these videos available on our IGTV on YouTube, and we are also on Facebook. So see of all our contents in these websites, and then thank you for so much supports. I'm just ending the live, and I will meet you next live soon on next Sunday. So I hope all will come and meet me in that live. Okay, I hope you guys don't miss it. Okay, bye guys, thank you.